But I would like, by the way, it's 2:15 in the East Coast, and so I should be asleep right now. So if I'm incoherent in any way, please, I apologize in advance. I would like to start by thanking the Sudan Advocacy Network and SWEN for organizing this important event, for the initiative, and also for bringing us here. It's lovely to be in Arizona to meet some old friends, and not to mention the water that the lovely Miss Southern Sudan presented. Thank you so much. In my talk, I'm going to focus on two broad issues or questions related to the referendum as it affects women and as it affects women and men who are active in civil society. And I will be touching upon some of the issues that my colleagues mentioned from that perspective as well. I have two questions in mind. One is, how does the referendum, its context and process, affect women in a distinct way? Does it affect women and men differently? That's the first question, and my answer to that question is yes. The second issue is that, and I've been really struggling with this question for over 10 years now. I've done research on that. I've been having discussions with colleagues and friends from all over Sudan around this issue. Is that, are there any possibilities for us as Sudanese women and men, and especially as Sudanese women, to work together across our ethnic, political, and other kinds of divides, or is it too late for that? Now, the context in which this question, in which I asked this question in the past was very different from now. We are 6 months away from the referendum. And I believe that we can and we should work together. We should continue to work together as civil society activists and as women, regardless of whether or not Sudan remains united. As a background, I just have in mind the heated discussion, the important discussions that we had this afternoon, and the emotional response of the different camps who, when people were discussing whether or not Southern Sudan should secede. And, it's not about, I don't think that we should be posing this question at present, as my colleagues just mentioned. This is really about the right of the people of Southern Sudan, the women and men, to self-determination. It is for them to decide that issue, on that issue. However, I believe also that the outcome of the referendum is going to affect all people of Sudan, even people in the neighboring countries, especially if the result is secession. And we need to take that into account as well. I think that also the referendum process is one of several other processes. One is the ABA referendum, another is the consultation in southern Kordofan, and also the consultations in the Blue Nile area. And it is going to happen in the context of the Darfur peace process and attempts to end that conflict. It's also happening in the context of political repression, severe political repression that continues in the north, and that shouldn't have been the case according to the CPA, according to what people agreed in the CPA. And it is happening in the context of a severe humanitarian crisis in the south, by the way. So we need to take all that into account when we think about the referendum. So does the referendum affect women and men differently, and how is that the case? I believe that to be able to answer this question, we need to really look at the factors behind the conflict and the process that led to people in southern Sudan achieving the right to self-determination. And I'm not going to talk about the causes, the root causes of the conflict. My colleagues have addressed that already. But I think that the conflict the factors that gave rise to the conflict affect women and men in different ways. Women, as the late Dr. used to say, are al-muhammashat al-muhammashin, or the marginalized of the marginalized. And that's exactly what it's about, the way that it affects, that women and men are affected differently. For example, women and men from southern Sudan have not had the chance to access education in the same way that people in the north, in the political north, have had the opportunity to access that kind of education. However, if we look at the south, we would find that the level of illiteracy is higher amongst women compared to men. I often also say that one of the features of underdevelopment in the south, the potential underdevelopment that the south actually experienced, is that there is a lack of infrastructure. And for men, a lack of a road or a bridge may mean lack of access to trade routes or lack of access to schools and so on. But for a woman who is in labor, lack of roads that are, lack of proper roads and infrastructure and hospitals is an issue of life and death, because a woman can actually die if she is unable to access emergency obstetric care. Of course, women also and girls were victims and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. We saw that in the Nubu Mountains, we saw that in the south, and we saw that, of course, in Darfur recently. And I will come back to this later. When we look at the issue of the way women are affected in a distinct manner by the issue of the referendum and the processes around it, I think that the issue of security is very relevant here. And the way this affects women is that a lot of the security-related issues are actually linked with border demarcation. And I agree with my colleagues that this is going to be a time bomb, actually, if it's not sorted out properly before the referendum process takes place. And I believe that if conflict erupts as a result of conflict over resources, over grazing land between the different tribes, then there is going to be an ethnic dimension to this conflict. And if this is the case, then women's bodies are going to be used are going to be markers, actually, of these ethnic differences. And as a result, women will experience sexual and gender-based violence. And this has happened in Sudan in the past, as I said, and this happens also elsewhere in the world. There is an ongoing conflict in the DRC. We know the Rwanda genocide. We know about what happened in Bosnia as well. Because women, as many sociologists usually say, actually are responsible for reproducing nations, right? Women reproduce nations biologically and culturally. They transmit culture to other generations. And that's why they are attacked. They are the first to be attacked in such conflicts. And that's why I believe that as women, and especially for women from Southern Sudan, there are high stakes. Women have a high stake in ensuring that there is a referendum process that's free and fair, where security is actually in a secure process. And also, I believe that women should really participate in a meaningful manner in that process. I am linked with the Sisterhood for Peace, and I see several sisters here from the Sisterhood for Peace. I would like to recognize them. And we recently actually submitted a letter to the National Assembly when we saw the nominations for the commission. Earlier, our sister Michelle talked about the commission for Southern Sudan, and from the Sisterhood for Peace, this letter actually asked for better representation of women. Right now, only one woman was nominated to be on that commission, and we have asked for at least 4 of the 9 commissioners to be women, if possible, of course. And we rely on the CPA in making that demand. I believe another way in which the referendum can affect women in the north and in the south and in different parts of Sudan is that in such when there is such a critical issue, a very fundamental issue that's going on, sometimes women's issues become defined as less important. As a women's rights activist, I believe that for all of us in Sudan, as women, we should really enjoy equal rights with our brothers, regardless of which part of Sudan we are from. And these rights are actually sanctioned, for example, in the African Women's Rights Protocol, in the Convention, of all forms of discrimination against women. And whenever we campaign on these issues, and when there is such an important process that's going on, the response that we often get is that, well, السودان في حالة أن يكون أو لا يكون. Sudan may not remain united. There may not be a Sudan as the Sudan that exists right now in the near future. And we talk about women's rights. I think women's rights are important to take into account, especially if we think about issues around sexual, gender and sexual-based violence and the other factors which I discussed earlier. Another issue that may be important to my sisters in Southern Sudan is that sometimes after such a process, especially if Southern Sudan achieves independence, people may think that خلاص نحن جبنا بلدنا and our issues have been sorted, and this is not going to